Right, so the presentation I'm bringing up now is an overview of what we are thinking about and to give you a bit more education on what we mean when we talk about digital literacy and digital inclusion. So this is a statement made by Tom Camber from Senior Planet, actually, and he also runs the older adults technology services in the United States. And this is a statement that he made. Smartphones and the internet access have become essential to socialize, carry out everyday tasks, and access healthcare. If you only have a telephone, you are disconnected. And I'm sure there are very few of us that use a telephone just for telephone right now, but many of us don't use it to the level of access that we could, that would be much more valuable. The world of disruption and change via technology is changing at a really serious pace, rate of change. So to explain this slide, if we look in the bottom half of the slide, which would be your 20th century world, an old paradigm thinking, where your first 25 years were more about education, then from 25 to 65 you worked, then you retired around that age, and your retirement was very short, just a few years. And you will see that in the bottom half, the red line, the relative rate of change, was pretty constant. It didn't move like the top half, which is more what's happened in the last 20 years, where the rate of change compared to the 20th century is massive. COVID, this graph and this visual was done by Heather McGowan more than before COVID, but that would be another massive red peak in this graph. But change is, and technology is changing so much of society that we need to reflect on where is it that we've been left behind and why is it that we need to engage more. So you will see from a lifelong learning point of view, the blue goes all the way through your life. It's not just in the early years. This is a lifelong learning session you're on right now. Your work needs to possibly extend beyond 60, mainly because many of us may not have enough money. And secondly, work brings a lot of worth and interest for individuals. And then remaining engaged regardless, whether it's in volunteering, working, learning, beyond that until your last breath or whenever you can. So it's because of this specific scenario that we need to remain more engaged. And the second thing is the 20th century was much more of an analog world, and now we're moving very fast into a digital world. And I know many of us, when we look at this visual, and I use this visual specifically because there's a lot of fear and lack of confidence for many of us as we have to learn these new skills and move into a world that seems to have a different language to the one we learned in the 20th century, which is the analog world. So, and the way in which we communicate is changing. As you saw from that red line, the pace of change is fast. Every one of us on this call is known as a digital immigrant, which means that these digital skills are learned skills that we are learning as we go along. And having to learn them is much harder when we're older compared to many of us that have seen small children or our grandchildren. Literally, almost, it feels like it's part of their DNA. And so to get to the other side of this cliff face, it's necessary for us to build this bridge, hold the hands of our digital immigrants and take us across to the other side. Because if we're living longer, we do need to stay connected. And that's why for me, it's absolutely critical that digital inclusion is not just for the younger generation from an economic perspective, but for the older generation, and you will see just now where we work through on that. So I've been in a lot of discussions where Jane, won't you let Maureen in, please? I'm so scared if I click my screen, thanks. Um, I've been talking to a lot of people globally about digital inclusion, and this is a three-legged stool is the model that they often talk about. And so for your stool to stand, you need all three elements. So the first one is your hardware. That would be your cell phone, your computer, your iPad. The second is your data connection, or your whatever it is, whether it's fiber, whether it's data on your phone. And we are all aware that that's one of the major challenges in South Africa, that connectivity is still expensive. But many of us, there are other ways to connect, but because we don't know where to go, we're still spending much more than we should on connectivity. And again, it's a cost that has come down a lot. But again, we need to know where to go to be able to do the connectivity. And the third one is the digital skills. So you can have your iPad or your phone, you can have enough data, but if you don't have the skills, you can't connect. If you happen to be in a rural area without a smartphone, without connectivity, and without skills, then you're missing all three legs. So again, it depends completely on the areas of South Africa, if we were doing research as to what this three-legged stool would look like. And I would love to encourage someone to do proper research on this for the older generation in South Africa. So this is a statement that's true of South Africa too, because we do have an enormous amount of cell phones. Smartphones have global penetration of over 95%. And now the divide has shifted. Now the inequality is between those who have bandwidth, connectivity, and more or fewer digital skills. So those are the other two legs of the stool. This is some research that was done in the USA. So it is a USA research, but it probably would look pretty similar in South Africa. One of the reasons why we want to do a survey and some polls is to really understand this. So the first line, firstly, they've got the generations at the top, the millennials, sort of 15 to 35, Gen X's 35 to 55, baby boomers 55 to 75, and the silent generation 75 plus. So in their survey was how many were using the internet across the 4 generations. Quite a big difference in how many are using social media, and you can see quite a massive difference between the baby boomers and the silent generation when it comes to social media and those that have a smartphone. And again, smartphones are quite intuitive, and iPads as well. So again, this is a cost issue for many, and so this could be one of the reasons why in an older generation they are not connected. But our world has gone digital, as we continue to say, and one of the things that for me is absolutely critical is that young people mostly are designing the applications and the offerings, and have felt to be quite smart in doing that during this last year with COVID. But what has happened is, without focus groups for older consumers, many of them have been felt even more isolated because they haven't taken the older generation into account in going digital. And so for Marilyn and I, or for our 2 organizations, from an advocacy point of view, that's what we want to do, is we want to go back to corporates and say, come alongside us and support the older generation in learning these skills and bring us into focus groups, so that we can make sure that there is good understanding on products that are being designed. So this is my friend Richard Adler from Silicon Valley, and he's been involved in digital literacy for the older generation for many, many years. And these are just some points that I extracted from his research. So computers and digital technology offer multiple benefits to older adults. Some of the biggest challenges for aging are loneliness, boredom, worthlessness, and isolation. But the internet can provide many resources, from games and online courses to linking with friends and family. And it's much better for us from a mental health perspective and can improve our levels of depression and loneliness and being more connected. I know for me personally, living alone, that being connected and engaged, especially during the COVID era, was what kept me mentally stable. And so these are some of the challenges where my heart breaks for the many people who may completely have been disconnected during this time. And we will all recognize this in our own children and grandchildren, is that you know, they seem to be attached to their multimedia world, but it's because they're not just computers. They're places where photos, chats, streaming, videos, your entire life across many, many fields can be engaged in living and using your technology. So we are living in a connected world, and we should be able to learn how to do that. So what are some of the things that we can do together to cross this divide? Firstly, we need to understand where we are. So each of you can look at what I'm talking about. We have to explore and understand what, you know, we don't know what we don't know. And so part of this is trying to bring awareness. We want to be able to offer talks, demonstrations, more talks, hopefully sponsored by corporates who are involved in this space. A safe place to practice and to be understood. And you'll see my last point is become a community agent of change. Many of you may be quite skilled in this area, and often it takes one other older person to help one other older person, rather than them always turning to their grandchildren, because the grandchildren fix it, they don't teach them how. And the grandchild does not understand your mindset. It's a completely two generations, or our children even. And so, you know, we really need to find a way for us to help one another and to connect on this together, and acquiring the new skills and being community change agents. So where can you personally go after this session? So we're having this session to outline our thinking. We will be sending a survey to everybody to help us answer a few more questions, to get a little bit more data for a media release, so that we can get more corporates involved. We would like to run regular sessions on Zoom to develop some of these skills, and share ideas and places where this learning can take place. One of the things that we can't do is be the solution to all of your questions, but we can possibly highlight community champions who could be there to help you. Some of that stuff you may need to pay for. I know when I started to teach myself skills, I have always either paid someone to help me, gone on a course, or had someone that I can ask one-on-one with a list of challenges. When I sort those challenges out, I'll make the next list. And I slowly but surely have developed and invested in my own learning to make sure that I am better equipped to be able to cope. So these are some of the things that you know, we can do. So what we're going to do now, this is my last slide, is that we're going to do the breakout room, as I said. If some of you have not been on a breakout session before, you will see a blue block's going to come up. Firstly, I'm going to finish the presentation and you'll all be back on the screen. And then I'm going to put you into a breakout room, and you'll be about 4 or 5 of you in a breakout room for 10 minutes. Please make sure each person gets a chance to engage. A small group is great from that point of view, but don't let one person dominate. You'll get pulled back into the main room after the 10 minutes, so you don't need to do anything. And if you can choose one person in your group to give feedback, not what their opinion is, but what they heard in the room, and give a summary for us in the discussion section. And the question that I want you to ask is, what is holding you personally back, and what skill is most urgent for you to learn to be able to move forward? So again, what is holding you back, and what skill is most urgent for you to learn?